All right, I am delighted to present, this is in 2025, we're recording this, delighted to present one of my wonderful teams that prepared a project for the AI and business course. And I asked if we could record this, and they said that we could. I could share it with future students to get an idea of types of projects students might do in my AI for business course. So Jared, Jordan, Peter, and Melanie, I'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you. So, like Dr. Sampson mentioned, this is our travel bot AI tool that we created. So the main purpose behind this tool is to streamline flight searches using AI and real-time data. It's meant to optimize scheduling and do that through smart recommendations. Our targeted audience is travelers, vacation planners, college students like me just wanting to get out of Provo, and digital nomads. And it is currently broadcasted on a web-based desktop application. So kind of the main two issues that we run into when it comes to planning vacations is just the rigid date kind of airport searches. Sometimes it gets difficult to find the flights that you want, the dates that you want, the price that you want, right? And the second issue would be vacation, just scheduling in general. It can be really tedious, really time consuming, and inefficient at sometimes. So our tool makes it possible to find flights based off historical data via Amadeus APIs, and it will choose the flights and you can add them personally to your Google Calendar. AI recommends nearby attractions when prompted, and like we mentioned, it can all be integrated into your personal Google Calendar. So Jared will be giving us a live demo of our tool.
Okay, so we're going to go over the area that was built in was N8N. So we have kind of the schematics of how it works. Starting off, it has a chat that you talk with it just like you would with any chatbot, basically, where you can put information in about what you want and just talk to it, and it'll get the information figured out and do the course that it thinks is best for it. So first goes into its identifier to figure out what you're asking about. This identifier has three categories it can go into: flight information, calendar, and activity. And so when it goes and has the text from the prompt come in, it tries to categorize it into one of these three categories, and then it sends it down the paths depending on which one of those it goes with. So the first one we can see is the flight one. So this one has the first step being retrieving an Amadeus token. So for that, it goes to this website here with some information from the Amadeus website that I have for my account there. And it takes these fields and sends them over, and then it returns a token. And the token is what you need to be able to actually do queries on Amadeus. So then this flight agent, who has its own prompt and everything, is able to use its tools that are listed below. It has this prompt that tells it kind of what to do, what things it needs to be able to return, kind of fields that it should be filling out. It also tells it the current date and time, so it has an idea if you say, like, can you find me a flight for tomorrow? So looking at the tools, it has a one-way flight searcher, a two-way or round-trip flight searcher, and then the flight price comparison. So those are the three Amadeus tools it has. It also has a Wikipedia lookup, because that allows it to look up airports it may not know the codes for, because Wikipedia has a list of airports. The second path is the AI agent that does calendar integrations. So it can create events, it can delete events, it can look up events, and it can update events. That's its main integration there. These ones are actually built into Amadeus, so it's not as much stuff you actually have to tell it how to do. So it's mostly just telling it, hey, these are the fields I want you to fill out, and then it is able to do those processes. And going on to the last one, we can see the AI agent for looking at places to do things. So this one's connected to Google Places API, and it's able to look up pretty much anything you want that Google Places is able to return searches for. And so that gives us the option to look up a lot of information about restaurants, about places to visit, things like that. So to start off with the example of an actual thing we're going to do, we're going to look up a flight from Salt Lake to Los Angeles.
Let's do it sometime in May too. Can you find a flight in May?
Yeah, let's do Cinco de Mayo. And once it does that, you can see that it's going through the path. It's got the message, it's got the task identified, it goes up, and it's going through this flight searcher. You can see the agent is working currently. It's already gotten the information. It's just translating that into the model to be able to bring back the results. So once it does that, it updates the memory here that holds the short-term memory. So it has some information on the past. and then it gives you the options. So we've got a few different options of what could work for our request. It also lists the prices and stuff for each one, and then at the end, it gives a summary of the prices for the flights. So we can also ask it other questions about it, like we talked about before, what is the usual price for this? And it should go to the same agent, and that time it'll just use a different tool. So this time it's going down, and it should use this flight comparison tool, bring back the data into the agent, and then once it's done with that, it'll go back to this AI model. And the AI model will be able to give you back the information about what flight prices are usually like, and it should also give you a short comparison of that to the prices that are allowed, or that are being presented. Yeah, so they're quite competitive compared to the usual prices. Additionally, we can look up like what's the earliest flight.
Another nice thing with the workflow being shown, each of the specific tasks, is if you get an error, it'll show you the specific block that the error is on, making it a lot easier to fix as well.
Yeah, it's true. So it's showing us that this is the earliest flight. So we get there 9:37. So if we want to put that on our calendar, we can just say, can you add that to my calendar? And then it'll identify the task as a calendar task, or it looks like it actually misidentified it as a flight task. And now it's going back down to the calendar one once it realized it was actually an issue. So now it's been added to the calendar. If we go into our calendar, we should be able to look on Cinco de Mayo and see a flight to Los Angeles. And it has the information for that. So once we get there, is there anything you guys want to do?
Jared, I always work up a big appetite on a flight. Are there any places to get some food once we land in Los Angeles?
Yeah, let's look up.
What time was it when we land?
Looks like 9:37.
Let's do breakfast.
I think that's good.
I like that food idea though.
All right, so now it's going down this other path. It's using the Google Places API. It's retrieved some information from there. And it's going back to the AI model to be able to return the results of the options it's found. And it should be returning them based on the rating that they have, because that's how I told it you should do in the system prompt. So you can see the higher ratings are up higher. Is there any of these that look good for breakfast?
That Courtyard Cafe looks pretty good.
Okay. So let's add Courtyard Cafe for 10 o'clock.
And it's inexpensive too.
True.
Sounds good to me.
All right. So just to make sure, we can see that there's not an appointment here right now for it. Now when we add, it should go through the same steps that it did previously, where it goes through here and adds on that event to the calendar. Okay, so now we can see there's breakfast at Courtyard Cafe. Is there anything else you guys want to do while we're there?
Well, to burn off some calories, maybe we should add some pickleball, right? Right after breakfast.
Sounds like a great idea.
I usually bring my paddles on a flight anyways, so.
Mm.
All right, so now it's going to look up the places that you can play pickleball, and it should be able to give us a few options around there. And once it returns that, we can pick out one of those and add that to our calendar as well. Okay, do any of these pieces look like places you'd want to go? Play pickleball?
I like El Segundo. Spanish,
You can also just refer to it as the number. And so using this, it should be able to go through and find the event for breakfast. Or use the memory to find the event for breakfast, and then it can add that event after without actually being told the time that it needs to add that at. So now we can see it's saying it's from 11 to 12. We can check on our calendar. And yep, it says 11 to 12.
Awesome. And obviously that's really nice because it means when you're actually communicating with the bot, it's just really natural. So you don't even have to specify all the times. You can just say after this or after that or at lunch or something.
Yep, so that's the basic functionalities of our bot. And so now we're going to go back to the presentation.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a second and just look at the competitive analysis between our tool and some other tools that are available. And so we had a few options. Obviously, there's our tool, the travel bot, there's things like Google Flights, Eddy Travels, and then Hopper. And so when we compare our tool to other bots, Google Flights is really good about flight optimization, checking prices, and even calendar integration, but it doesn't have the same ability to, first of all, you can't communicate with it like you can with our chatbot with natural language. And second, it's not able to find different attractions or different places you might want to go after your flights, which is really nice about our travel bot. Something that's probably most similar to the travel bot is this website called Eddy Travels. It's also based on this chatbot sort of feature where you just communicate with it, and it does do a good job with flight optimization, and it can also find some things like hotels around airports, but it doesn't have the same sort of integration with calendar, and it doesn't have the same sort of analysis for regular prices for flights. Furthermore, it doesn't have quite as broad an area for different things around where you're traveling. It's mostly focused on hotels and things like that. The last one is something called Hopper, which does have flight optimization, and it actually does have some integrations with finding hotels as well. But again, it doesn't integrate with calendar. It doesn't really find anything outside of places to stay, and it doesn't have that same analysis with regular flight prices. And so that's our competitive analysis relative to other competitors that may be comparable to our travel tool. The other thing we want to look at briefly is how we selected some of our different models. So as you saw, we were using GPT-4o Mini for the LLM. We had Google Calendar. We were using Amadeus API for finding flight information. And then finally, we're using Google Places to find different locations to go and travel. As far as the large language model goes, that one's actually, GPT-4o Mini is very cheap and it runs at a pretty high level. But the tipping point for that between other models like Claude 3 or Gemini 2.0, which are comparable on price, is when you use N8N, you get free integration with GPT-4o Mini, which is obviously really easy for us. As far as Google Calendar goes, it's just the most widely used calendar, really pretty simple to integrate with API and using OAuth access as well. As far as Amadeus goes, Amadeus is really good at looking at historical prices, and it has a really broad range of flights. Furthermore, some of these other things like Skyscanner and Travelport require like an enterprise account or a really large scale operation, which maybe you could have an application like this at large scale, but for our purposes, Amadeus was most effective. And then finally, Google Places versus things like Foursquare or Yelp just has more options. It has things on a broader range of categories from hotels to foods to recreation. And that's why we went with Google Places. And so let's go ahead and take a quick look at the functional and some of the non-functional requirements before we talk about some of our assumptions and dependencies. As you saw, we fulfilled these functional requirements. There's real-time historical data for the flights. There's comparison between that data. There's the ability to manually adapt your calendar. Obviously, you can go into your own Google Calendar and you can edit it however you want. The AI will also recommend attractions or places for you to visit. And then finally is the Google Calendar integration where our bot actually goes into your calendar and makes changes or adds events. Some of the non-functional requirements that we're going to look at had to do with security. But the first one was actually that it's optimized for desktop. Looking at security, our API keys are encrypted in transit, and then we also have OAuth authentication when you go and use your Google Calendar account. And so with that, let's go ahead and talk about some assumptions and some dependencies.
Sure. So the assumptions that we have include that there's accessible Google Flights data, that the Google Calendar API is functional, and then dependencies are that we need a Google account for this functionality, and that and we're also obviously dependent on the LLM, which in our case is OpenAI. So we put this graphic up, obviously very tied to Google and its capabilities. Next, the limitations and future development. The current limitations are that it's a desktop app, and then that need for Google Calendar that we mentioned. And then future enhancements that we would look at are the mobile optimization, as well as expanding our data sources for enhanced recommendations. And eventually we would want to be able to actually book those flights within the tool and have that functionality there. So in our demonstration, just to recap, a flight search flexibility and price optimization, we're able to have itinerary building and sync with the Google Calendar. And then the final point, the tool provided some activities or sightseeing suggestions for us.
And this is just a quick testimonial of the one and only Kristen Sampson. Thank you.
Good job, team.
Hold the applause.